Hey guys, today I want to do a review of the 2021 Kawasaki Z125 Pro. This is also the 1,000 mile review. So I put just over 1,000 miles on this thing. As you can see right there, it's at 1,009 miles. And I gotta say, this thing hasn't given me any issues other than the chain getting loose because it's not an O-ring chain on here. So there's no O-rings in there, so it got loose, but you're supposed to adjust it every 1,000 miles anyway. So I ended up adjusting it around 700 miles, and you just undo this screw, undo this nut right here, and you tighten that one down, and tighten that one down to lock it, and you do that on both sides. Another thing I want to say about it is the stock brake lines absolutely sucked. They were rubber hoses and they did not perform at all, really. So I upgraded to these steel braided brake lines here. Ran them in the front and in the rear. Didn't take that long. It's probably about a half an hour job, plus adding brake fluid back in after you bleed them. But yeah, it was a pretty simple job to do, but it definitely improved the braking performance a lot. I'll thank everyone on the Kawasaki Z125 Pro page for that info. Because these ones actually had the adjustable banjo bolts. So you can actually grab here and here and twist this so the brake line wouldn't be twisted up at all. So thanks for that. One thing that I added to this bike, I didn't do any modifications so far other than the brake lines and this rear rack here. This rear rack, pretty sturdy. I got it off eBay for about $100. I mostly use this motorcycle for going to get groceries and whatnot, so I got this Kriega 30-liter dry bag that I've had for probably 7 or 8 years now, and that thing's held up just fine. And inside actually has a liner. You can dump it out, clean it out, whatnot. I think the oil changes are only due every 3,000 miles on this thing. I think the first one's at 1,000, so this thing should do an oil change soon. One thing I have noticed about this motorcycle is it runs differently than it did when it was brand new. So when it was brand new, it did not like to get up to speed very fast. It was really slow, but as it kind of got broken in, it could accelerate faster, and it has a higher top speed now. Before, it maxed out around 62 on the speedometer, and that really meant you were going like 59 miles an hour, because it's about 3 miles an hour faster reading than it is actual. So now I get to the rev limiter on the highways. I use this thing on the highway. Most people do not use these on the highway, but I do. I have used this off-road one time. Went to the local ATV park and took it off-road. Suspension is not meant for that. Wheels are not big enough for that. Ground clearance, you don't have enough ground clearance for most of the rock obstacles or log obstacles, so I would recommend against using it at an actual ATV park. But as far as like dirt road touring and stuff like that, this thing would be perfect for that. But nothing like major rocky terrain, no major logs or anything you have to climb over. I mean, this bike you can practically pick up over, so as long as you put a skid plate down here, which I don't know if they make one or not, but I would definitely remove this fairing here if you're going to be taking it off-road. That fairing pretty much just protects the exhaust header and the oxygen sensor. One thing I've noticed in the past 1,000 miles is the exhaust has gotten louder. So if I start it up here and I rev it up, I noticed it sounds more like a kind of like a regular motorcycle engine now. It's a little bit louder. You can really hear the ignition happening in the engine. I'm going to assume that that has to do with it all being trained properly now and getting up to speed better. So it's optimizing the fuel air mixture, from what I understand. Everything else has stayed pretty much the same. Tires have held up. once I've worn these tires in a little bit, you know, it is about 1,000 miles on them. Looks like they're almost down to the wear indicators here. So front tires probably should be replaced. Once those wear indicators get worn away, you need to replace the front tire. But it seems like it took me getting that much wear on this tire to actually be able to lean over in the corners without it slipping. Those tires are pretty slippery when you have them brand new. These tires are definitely slippery when they're brand new. Unlike any other motorcycle tire I've ridden, these almost caused me to have a slide out several times when I first got the motorcycle. I came from a 1000 cc and I'm a skilled rider. I do not use this bike for fooling around or nothing like that. I use this for running errands and running to the grocery store and back, and for just doing long distance trips. But another thing I gotta say about long distance trips, anytime you're on this seat for more than an hour, you're gonna regret it. Your legs are gonna be numb and falling asleep. It just sucks because these 2 points here, there's like a lump here, and it goes over, and here it goes over. It's really sharp right where your sit bones are, and really pushes on your nerves. Now I do want to get a Corbin seat for this eventually, but as for right now, I'm planning vacations and whatnot, so that's not going to happen right now due to financial stuff, because that seat, the Corbin seat, costs about $500 and some plus shipping. Plus you have to wait a month or two for it to actually get here. Other than that, the motorcycle's been pretty reliable. I really like it. Even coming down from 1000 cc, I've used this thing on the interstate as well. It tops out at 66 miles an hour on the speedometer. I say speedometer and the actual speed because the speedometer will tell you one thing and your actual speed's going to be another. So at 66 miles an hour, the rev limiter kicks in, and you cannot go any faster than that. I don't like the rev limiter because it kind of acts like a brake, and it just kind of like makes you lunge forward constantly, because you can go faster if you had higher revs or a bigger gear, but you just can't do it because the rev limiter kicks in. So that would be one of my complaints, would be the rev limiter. If they increase this from, I think the rev limiter is set at rate around 9,500 is where rev limiter kicks in at, and if they set it for probably like 12,000 RPMs, you could probably reach 67, 68, maybe even 70 miles an hour on your speedometer here, which really would mean you're going 3 miles an hour less than whatever the speedometer is reading. So at 66 miles an hour, I'm going 63 on the interstate, which if I was able to go 2 miles per hour faster, I'd be going the legal speed limit of the interstate. But it's okay as long as you're going over 50 miles an hour, you're not impeding traffic. So that's one good note I want to point out there. All right, now we're going to do a 0 to 60 going on to the interstate. You can go over 55 miles an hour, you're not technically impeding traffic on an interstate with a speed limit of 70 miles an hour. 50 miles an hour under the speed limit without having to use some sort of hazard flashers or hazard signs, slow moving vehicle placard. Trucks do it all the time when they climb hills. They put on the hazard flashers. Not the recommended, but it's actually the law. Most people don't realize that law exists, but you can get a slow moving vehicle placard. I guess you could probably put it on your back. You know, it's just like a little reflective orange triangle if you wanted to take it on a longer distance road trip. I would definitely recommend, if you're going to get one of these bikes, upgrade the seat to a Corbin seat if you're going to be doing long distance rides like I will. I gotta say, has really come in handy for putting this bag on, because before this bag would be up here and I'd be kind of sitting on the bag the whole time. This kind of keeps the bag off the seat so I can actually sit back here. You know, if I start getting butt sores up here, I slide back here and I'll be fine. Another thing I wish they would do for this motorcycle is I wish they made a lighter tire option that didn't cost more than the motorcycle. Or a lighter wheel option that didn't cost more than the motorcycle. They make carbon fiber wheels that I think cost $3,000 for this motorcycle. So the aluminum ones on there, I'm just going to keep on there. I wanted to go with a lighter wheel option to increase the speed and acceleration. These aluminum wheels are going to have to do for now. I guess the biggest savings you're going to get is if you upgrade to a lighter weight tire. But most tires that are for this are scooter tires, so you don't get much of an option as far as performance wise, because scooter tires are not meant for performance, which is kind of off-putting because this is a motorcycle technically. I suppose if you took these fenders off, the front one and the rear one, you could put bigger wheels on here. Right now it's got 12-inch rims on there. You could probably put a 14 or 15 inch. You possibly get away with a 15-inch rim on here. So especially if you're going to convert this into a dirt bike, which is something I was considering. If you're going to do the dirt bike conversion, you're going to have to take off the front because the front wheel is usually bigger and it's just 2 bolts in there. So no big deal, you just have to worry about it hitting the crown. So as long as it clears the crown when the forks are bottomed out, you have nothing to worry about. I haven't tested this, so another thing I gotta say is I do like the adjustable rear shock. I have it almost all the way stiffened up because I carry cargo back here sometimes, usually just groceries, and I'm a heavier rider, around 200 pounds. So, but if I stiffen it up all the way, I feel that it starts bouncing a little bit in the rear, so that's why it's almost at the max. But it's nice that this has the adjustment, but the Grom doesn't. This only has a 4-speed manual transmission. I know someone had asked me if it's possible to convert to automatic, and I don't think it's possible to convert to automatic for the US model. I've heard rumors that in other parts of the world you can actually get these in automatic, but again, that's just a rumor. I'm not 100% sure on it. But I do know that if you made it into automatic, in some states it'll actually just be considered a scooter, which is kind of the whole point of making a manual transmission, making it a motorcycle, is that it's not a scooter, it's actually a motorcycle that, you know, you can get used to riding an actual motorcycle, shifting the speeds and getting used to doing all that stuff. That's something you could actually easily take your learner's permit in, because if you drop this thing, you ain't doing much money in damage. I mean, you break a fairing on this thing, it's like $100 at most. You break a fairing on a faster bike, especially like a panel like this, it costs you like $1,000 on a Gixxer. But it's like $700 or $1,000. So if you do it yourself, it's gonna be like $700. You do it, have a dealership do it, they're gonna charge you like $100 an hour labor to do it. And it's just gonna be one expensive vest if you even crack one of those things. But on this bike, you know, even if you do like mess up the bike, the whole bike costs like $3,000. So not too much money to buy a new one. And you know, if you ruin the engine or transmissions are only like $400 for this thing. So if you ruin the transmission and strip the gears on it, no big deal. A couple $100 you have working again. And most of this is user serviceable. The engine's held in with like a couple bolts, and it's really small and easy to work on. That's the reason why most people do modifications to them. If you burn out the clutch, I mean, the clutch is maybe like $60. So you sit there and rev the crap out of it with the clutch pulled in. Really no big deal. I mean, most of the parts are cheap on this thing. I mean, you break pretty much anything on this bike, you're looking at under $1,000 repair. Even to replace the whole engine, I think it's like $1,000 to replace the whole engine. So you might even be better off just replacing the whole engine with a new one. But again, that's one of the many benefits of having a cheap motorcycle. I use this thing for commuting, and mostly commuting and going places, traveling around. So like, I haven't really taken on an official motorcycle packing trip yet, but that is going to be planned at some point. On this Kawasaki Z125 Pro, It's I bought it for the color, really. I like blue. This is a teal color. It's more of a greenish blue color. And usually I mount my phone to this. I use quad lock. I use that on my downhill mountain bikes, and mostly for cycling I use quad lock. And I've never had a phone come off the mount. I've had the rubber bands. They're secured with rubber bands in here. I've had those snap and fall off the bike that way, but the phone will still be on the mount. So as long as you have it secured with good rubber bands that come with it, or you can just Garmin branded ones, then it'll stay on pretty much no matter what condition you put it in. And I've tested them for years, and I will stand by quad lock pretty much to the day I die, or as long as they freaking exist, because they've never failed me. I use them in my off-road truck on the windshield mount. The windshield mounts are actually pretty good. So I can't really say enough positive things about quad lock compared to the other products. However, zip tie a quad lock mount to your motorcycle or anything. You zip tie these things, they will fall off, because you may not realize this, but bars are sometimes tapered, and the zip ties just can't maintain the pressure to hold it onto the bars. So these motorcycle bars are not tapered, but the thing is, things expand and contract with heat and cold. So as the bars heat up, they'll expand, making it tight, but once they cool down, like if it's a cloudy day, this will become cold and your zip ties will be loose, and this thing will just rock around. But as you can see right now, it just stays right where it is, because rubber bands keep a tension on it. So it has like a rubber backing that sticks to your bars pretty well. Rear brake, I still haven't gotten much performance out of the rear brake on this bike. There's really nothing you can do about it. It's just small brakes. I mean, I'm assuming if you upgrade to a better brake system like a Brembo, but I've only seen one Brembo system and there's no way to order it, so I'm stuck with these brakes. I'm used to having dual caliper brakes on the front, so I'm used to having tons of stopping power. This thing definitely does not have tons of stopping power. You really have to apply pressure when you're stopping with this thing, which, combine that with the rubber brake hoses that came with it, and you're a recipe for disaster. I never locked up the rear wheel on this thing. Usually you don't want to use the rear brake that much. Use it like 70% in the front, 30 in the rear, because all your weight's going to be on the front. And another thing I gotta say about that is these forks, the suspension really sucks on this thing. They're not adjustable at all, which I don't like. You can't adjust the rebound or anything. It's pretty much just replacing the springs in there. And that's another thing I hate about this. It's just a spring in there, spring and damper system. So all you hear when you go over a bump is like a squishing sound, you know. And it contracts pretty fast, pops back up. It sucks if you're going to be hitting a lot of bumps. Makes it really bumpy ride, because the dampeners in there aren't very good, and they're pretty much just rubber rings. So I don't really know what to say about the suspension. I'd rather put a dirt bike suspension on there, to be honest with you, even though it's going to offset the ride and pretty much make it go towards the back. They have an upgrade suspension for the rear. However, I don't know if I want to upgrade the rear suspension. It should be upgraded, but if I upgrade the suspension and raise it in the rear, it's going to contact the exhaust, which is something I don't want to happen. I could remove the stock exhaust and put an aftermarket on, but I like how quiet this motorcycle is. I like to be able to just putt around really quietly, and especially if you're in an area that you're not supposed to be in, trespassing, or if you're on like private land or something like that. This thing's great for sneaking around. No one's going to hear you, no one's going to know you're there. So a lot of people use these for stunt riding. I could definitely see the appeal to these stunt riding, because it's like a motorized bicycle pretty much. The weight of it is really lightweight. It's like a heavy bicycle, so it should be pretty easy to do wheelies and whatnot on. But that will conclude my 30 day